I think we can get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming in. This is going to be a short presentation about OpenStack Manila and all of the changes. Am I too loud? Good. OK. And all of the changes that we made in the Pike release of OpenStack. My name is Gautam Ravi. I am a contributor and a maintainer for all the projects in the Manila ecosystem. And the Manila PTL, Ben Swartzlander, could not be here in Sydney, so delegation, right? So here's a rough agenda of what we're going to talk about today. What is Manila? What is the problem space and the problem background that we have? And what are the changes that we made in Pike? What API changes, new features, and stuff? And going forward, what's happening in Queens? So what is Manila? Who uses it? And how should you use it? Well, Manila is the shared file systems provisioner. And it's the management layer in OpenStack. It's alongside Swift for object storage and Cinder for block storage. And Manila is the file storage provisioner. So it completes the trinity of storage solutions that you have in OpenStack at the management control plane layer. To the uninitiated, one of the popular things that you usually hear is Manila is Cinder for file shares. And that's only partially true because it was forked from the Cinder project. And there's a lot of cross-pollination of ideas, of features, and combined development that happens in Cinder and Manila. However, there are a lot of implementation differences. And these differences are completely intentional. Because the kind of problems that shared file systems solve in your clouds does not have a huge overlap with block storage or object storage, for that matter. It is about being able to provide concurrent and parallel access to multiple clients. And perhaps, yes, and block storage is not usually built for that kind of a use case. And your other alternatives are object store, but most applications that kind of require this kind of sharing may not be compliant with an object storage interface. Right, so Manila provides what is a byte addressable storage systems as a service, right? And besides being able to, besides multiple clients being able to access the storage, the shared file systems that you provision through Manila, they're inherently elastic. That is, they can be extended, shrunk at any given point of time. And this is not typically how you would behave with an object store or a block storage system. So that's the problem space that Manila is in. And like all of the OpenStack constellation of projects, Manila exposes a consistent and a simple REST API. And it has a lot of open source reference drivers. At last count, I suppose we have about 8 reference drivers, free and open source, for use, and multiple NAS protocols that are supported. I mean, some examples like NFS, CIFS. I mean, you have GlusterFS, CIFS, MapRFS, and so on. And it is built for massively scalable applications, applications that rely on these NAS technologies to be present and to be able to consume at an automated pace and scale. So the Pike release was pretty good for us. I just have the adoption numbers from Okata. I don't have it for Pike yet. And per the OpenStack maturity rating, we're 5 on 7. And a couple of those maturity indicators, at least to me, I mean, sound a little weird around a system like Manila. They include having SDK support in over 7 SDKs and so on. We're getting there, and that's kind of what we've been working on. And there's a ton of distributor and deployment tool integration that's come in the last couple of releases, and Pike was one more of those releases for us. So what's new in the 16th release of OpenStack, that is Pike, and the 6th official release of Manila? We have a lot of API changes. As you know, Manila was one of the first projects to implement API microversions. Our API was pretty stable through this release and has evolved about 6 microversions to provide support for some new features around filtering for resources, hardening of share groups, which were introduced a release ago, and some asynchronous user messages. That's a new feature that showed up in Pike for us, and support for IPv6, and some more Coda controls for multi-tenant clouds. So part of the new features for Pike, telemetry integration. This was support for telemetry. This didn't exist before Pike for us, and so now we're able to track creation and deletion of shares for snapshots, for share replicas, and any changes to the share size. Right, you're trying to extend, shrink. All of that can be funneled out into the telemetry API that OpenStack provides. And there's also an experimental framework we built around share usage tracking. And as you all know, probably, that Manila is not in the data path. Once we export these file systems and provide access to these file systems, Manila does not enforce anything in the data path. So this is probably one of the first times where we're querying, or when a backend can expose what is the consumption on that shared file system. And this is based on user feedback, because many deployers wanted to be able to charge back on how much was being used in the shared file system. Also opens up something for us in the future. We've been talking about being elastic a little more, where you don't have to specify the size of the share upfront, and we're able to create some auto sizing and then charge back based on how much is being consumed. More of a EFS or a scalable file system sort of a use case. And one other interesting, important feature for us has been improving the user experience, and this was through asynchronous user messages. And this solves a particular class of problems. As you know, the Manila architecture, the way it is built out, is to be able to give you fast feedback right away. Right, so you send an API request, we don't leave you hanging. We send you back a response saying the request is being actioned upon, a 202, right? And sometimes across the wire, as that request makes its way through the scheduler and into the different backends, there could be a failure, right? And this could be because the user has requested something that your cloud cannot satisfy, or there's some sort of a mismatch between the user expectations, or maybe the user just made a mistake, right? So, and this is the kind of thing that usually people get phone calls or escalations for. And so this sort of an improvement where we're able to provide an API to query all the failures that happened asynchronously is helpful in that case. So users can see what went wrong with their share as to why it didn't get created. We're not going to expose any or break any abstraction. We're not going to reveal any details of that particular cloud, but we could be telling them that, hey, you used a wrong parameter here, or you have not set up your network correctly, or something like that. So things that users can themselves action upon. One thing that's missing with this feature is it's not yet made its way into our Horizon plugin, and that's going to happen soon. But there's CLI and API implemented for this. IPv6, this has been a major development focus for us the last cycle and this coming cycle. We now, and as part of the Pike release, support IPv6. So drivers where storage backends have been configured with IPv6 addresses, addressability can export IPv6 exports instead of IPv4 exports, and clients can consume these shared file systems over IPv6 instead of IPv4. And this is an added capability to what was there. We still don't have dual IPv4 and IPv6 for when Manila manages exports by creating shared file systems, but it is something that the administrators can set up, but not when Manila manages creating these share servers. Manila can only create them in IPv6 or IPv4, and this is something we'd like to improve in this cycle to be able to provide dual IPv4 and IPv6 capabilities. The Manila API can be run against, run under popular web servers. This is something that was not there in the past. We have a custom eventless-based WSGI app, and you don't need to use that any longer. You could run the Manila API with Apache or Nginx. or any of the popular web servers that you could have. This is a good thing for deployers, especially because it promises one place for management of all of the OpenStack control plane as far as the API goes, and it also provides flexibility and performance and all of that stuff, all of that good stuff. So one other thing that we did in Pike was we changed a little bit of our Coda system. We didn't overhaul it. We added a few more capabilities. One of the good things is we now give you a handle for you to control quotas per share type. So you can pick up a share type and say, this project can have 10 resources of this share type, and this other project can have 5 resources of this share type. But one caveat though, you can't use that with users. So if your project has multiple users, you can't control quotas for individual users for those share types, because share types are assigned to projects and not individual users. So that's a caveat to remember, and that's possible in Pike. There's also access control, Coda control for share groups and share group snapshots as part of the share group improvements that we committed in this release. We've effectively established parity with the older consistency group API. So now you can create share groups, and you can ask for consistent snapshots if that capability is there in your cloud, to be a consistent snapshot across your group of shares. That's now a possibility in Pike. And you can also schedule share groups into specific storage availability zones if that's the way you've set up your cloud. And there's UI integration that's added for share groups in this cycle. Besides that, speaking of UI, we've dramatically changed the way the UI looks and feels, at least. There's a huge difference between running the UI as part of the Okada release and the Pike release. And part of that difference is all for the good. We made some performance improvements. We had just one panel with different tabs for your shared file systems, and now you actually have different panels, just like the volume service and the compute service. And that basically reduces the number of calls we're making to the backend to gather all the details. Besides that, we are no longer overlapping with quotas with the volume service. This was a weird bug because we had a quota called gigabytes, and Cinder had a quota called big gigabytes, and both of us, had the same kind of quota. And so people didn't know what to toggle the Cinder quota and the Manila quota. So this is a bug fix, and it's been committed in the Pike release. We also added support for Revert to Snapshot in the Manila UI. Some other noteworthy features, we now support Guru meditation reports. What this means is you can send a SIG user 1 to any of your Manila processes and get the current state of that process output into the log file that you've configured, right? So that's one way that deployers would like to know what's going on with their running Manila installations. The Ceph storage backend has now got an NFS gateway that can be configured in front of it, and so you can use CIFS over NFS if that's what you want to do. And there have been improvements in the EMC Unity driver, a lot of improvements. I could not collate all of them, and the NetApp drivers as well. They now support this storage QoS in this release. And one important thing for us, as far as contributors and developers in this space, is that we brought in all of the documentation in tree as part of the wider effort in OpenStack. So we used to have the API reference and the install guide that was published from Entry. We now publish the user guide, the administrator guide, the CLI reference, and the configuration reference from Entry. So we have lesser chances of going wrong with documentation, but I'm not saying they're all gone. So we're trying. This is an improvement to us to write better and more useful documentation. That said, quickly moving on to what we're doing in Queens. The Queens cycle is midway. We passed milestone 1 a month ago, and some of the improvements that are going to come in is we no longer will enforce a presence of the Manila policy.json file. So the policy is going to be moved into the code, and as long as you don't want to modify any default policies, you don't need to have that file at all. But if you do want to modify the default policies, you can feel free to have that file and just override the policies that you want to modify. And we will be documenting that as well. And we're re-architecting the Tempest plugin. So it's going to go out of the tree, and it's going to become a commodity that you can consume outside. We're really excited about this one because you can just install the Manila Tempest plugin and point it at a cloud and run all the Tempest tests that we've been writing. And one other thing is we're moving towards Python 3.6 and actively deprecating Python 2.7 support. And a lot of that is going to be happening in this cycle. The generic driver is going to get a major overhaul. We're calling it the next-gen generic driver. It's going to be better, faster, and more performant, hopefully, so we can back-end a lot of these people who want to get started with Manila with an out-of-the-box free and open-source driver. And improvements are going to be in the service image space, and we're also planning on supporting security services in this release for the generic driver. There are going to be a few new drivers. We've already merged a few of these that will be showing up in the Queens release. IPv6 support will be added to more drivers, and we're going to make some API enhancements as well. One last thing, and not the least, is when you restart your Manila services, you will see lesser delays going forwards because we are reworking the ensure share aspect, because Manila is unique in that it exposes the connection information right out the API. And if this connection information, that is the export paths and stuff, can change based on what the administrator has done to the backend, this is one way for us to reconcile that change. They would bounce this Manila Share Manager service, and we would go query all of those connection information changes and present it up the next time the user initiates that API request. But instead of doing that every time the service is bounced, we now have a mechanism where we're going to trigger that on demand. Only when the administrator or the driver figures out that there is a change, will it trigger that ensure share operation to happen. So all of your service restarts are now going to be as slow as they were. We're excited about that one. So that was a quick spiel of what's happening in Queens and what we are. So guess I got about 3 minutes. Any questions? Nope. All right. Oh, good. OK. Oh, the security services? Yeah, so I mean, Manila out of the box today supports three security services. CIFS, you could be using Active Directory, Kerberos for NFS or LDAP. So these were not being supported by the generic driver. So we're adding ways to support any of these three services for the administrators to configure them and to be able to use, for tenants to be able to use them as well. Yep. All right. If there are no more questions, thank you guys for stopping by, and hope to see you guys use Pike and let us know how it is. Thank you so much.